Hello! Today we're going to be doing a reading vlog. I am buddy reading. It's my first ever buddy read, and we're going to be doing Atonement by Ian McEwan. We spent ages trying to work out any books that we both had on our TBRs, and this was one of the few that we actually both wanted to read, and wasn't like one of us had read it. And anyway, I'm doing this buddy read with Karina from A Story of Sorts over on Instagram. She also runs a podcast by the same name, where she talks all about books and bookish things. She does not have a YouTube channel yet. Maybe she will, but she's a podcaster, so maybe she won't. So we'll be reading Ian McEwan, and I thought I'd bring you along for the ride. The reason I have Atonement on my TBR, even though it's not necessarily my favourite type of book from the blurb, is because I read On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan a couple of years ago, and just fell in love with his writing. I think he's an absolutely phenomenal writer. I now have a few more by him on my on my TBR, but this one was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2001, so another one that I'm interested in because it's on the Booker Prize nominees as well. So yeah, without further ado, let me take you along for the ride. Okay, I'm officially at the first check-in point that we'd agreed on, which is the end of chapter 8, as we're about to hit chapter 9. And honestly, we couldn't have picked a better cliffhanger moment to stop on before we catch up. So I'm just waiting for Karina to get to the same point so we can chat about it. But yeah, we've ended on this massive cliffhanger where Robbie, one of our protagonists, has handed a letter to the little sister to Bryony, the youngest, and then realised that he sent her off with the explicit version of the letter that he wrote, not the sort of carefully crafted one that he had handwritten. And he sort of realised what he's done, but he can't stop it now. Like, there's nothing he can do to prevent this. So I'm like desperate for Karina to catch up, because I now feel like I really need to know where this is going to go. Other than that though, like, I'm not sure. It's definitely not as good as On Chesil Beach. Definitely not as good. But it's certainly gotten better. It's quite a slow start. I really feel like we've gotten to know the setting and the characters before anything has really happened, whereas I think many stories really just throw you in and you learn about the characters through what happens to them. But this, I really feel like we're getting to know them through sort of long descriptions at the beginning. So it feels quite classic in its writing, which is not always the best for me, and I think that shows in how I'm feeling about it. But yeah, definitely now that we've hit this cliffhanger, I'm like, okay, now I need to know what's going to happen, because I know how explicit the letter is that he sent off to be delivered to this woman. So I'll check in with you soon. Next check-in point for Atonement. I think we're basically halfway through. We decided to stop at the point where it moves into part 2, and I'm shocked a bit. So I haven't seen the film. I'm sure I've mentioned that already. Whereas the person I'm doing my buddy read with has seen the film, so I don't think she's as shocked as I am. I might have to watch the film after this. I do think Ian McEwan is a very talented writer. This is still not, I don't think, as good as On Chesil Beach, but you can definitely see how talented he is. The way the different people think, the different personalities, so I thought it was going to be alternating between Bryony and Cecilia, but we have many more perspectives that are coming in. So we have chapters that are narrated from the mother's perspective, the Robbie, the love interest, some from some other minor sort of characters in it come in for little moments, and they each have their own distinct personalities that come across in the way that their section is written. For instance, Bryony, who is so imaginative, who's really into writing, the ways in which she almost changes the scene that she's looking at to make it more dramatic, like she's writing a play or like she's writing a novel. The language that she uses, even though she's so young, like, I do think it's very cleverly done. But yeah, I don't know if you've read it, what happens by the end of part 1. Poor Robbie. Poor Robbie. The poor person, of course. The person of the lower class is getting blamed for some hideous crime. Yeah, okay. Next section then. We've done the next third of this book. the next third, the third section. So the third quarter is what I really mean. And this section is like because he does split it up into sections. This section follows Robbie Turner as he is basically trying to make his way home from the war, so set around D-Day, and he's trying to make it to the beaches so that he can get home. And I was actually quite worried reading this that I wouldn't enjoy it, because I'm not a massive fan of like wartime literature, particularly where it's set within war. There has to be, for me to enjoy it, it has to be more about maybe the politics of war, or the way in which war influences something else, like personal lives, but actually sort of, let's say, battle scenes or being in the battles and stuff. That is really not something that I mean, you're never going to enjoy reading it, but like, it doesn't tend to grip me. It doesn't tend to keep me engaged. But this was my favourite section of the book so far. I flew through this bit. Ian McEwan is such a talented writer. And there was like a particular section in it where he arrives at the beach, like he gets his first glimpse of the sea and like the smell. And then it's like paralleled with, say, childhood experiences of going to the beach, like this stark contrast between your first glimpse of the sea as a child going on holiday and your first glimpse of the sea when it's supposed to be your way out of battle, of war, was just amazing, really. Yeah, so yeah, normally I really struggle. And if you've ever seen, what's it called? Is it actually called Dunkirk? There's a film that was done recently that had like Harry Styles in it. It had Tom, well, I don't know, all these famous people in it. And I went to see that at the cinema with my husband and my mother-in-law, and it was one of the hardest films for me to watch. It was like watching Titanic, just so gut-wrenching, and just, yeah, I find that really difficult. But this was a really good section, so I'm looking forward to getting to the last bit. This has taken a long time because I'm reading so many other books at the same time, and so is my friend who I'm buddy reading with, who I don't even think has actually read this section yet, so I don't know her thoughts on it. I mean, it's been 6 weeks, 2 months that we've been reading this very slowly. But yeah, there we go, section 3. Okay, so I finished this book on Christmas Day. It took ages because we're both quite busy. We had other reads that we wanted to get through as well. It took us quite a while, but we split it up into 4. So it's taken us September, October, November, December to read this. I don't even know if Karina has finished hers yet because she was really busy with some other stuff. But I found this last quarter to be such a roller coaster. And even since I finished reading it, I'm still on that roller coaster, not really sure how I feel about it. So the 4th section that we've read opens with Bryony, the youngest sister. Having grown up a bit, she's now working as a probationer, so as a nurse at a hospital in London. And she's doing this as some sort of repentance, almost as like when you'd flay yourself for church or something, like, you know, with the cat and eyes, or whatever, you'd whip yourself, whatever it is. It's kind of like this, where she's doing this thing, even though it's not what she loves, it's not writing, it's not what she wants to be doing. She's doing this thing because she feels like she needs to atonement for what she's done. And we open on some quite beautiful scenes, and one of the scenes that really had me, I mean, I rarely well up in books, but one of the scenes that really had me gripped was when D-Day happens. She's half expecting to see Robbie under all the grime of each of the patients that she's wiping clean. She then ends up sitting with this Frenchman who is just 18, so her age, who's had like half his head blown off, and he's basically dying, but because he's lost part of his skull, he isn't talking any sense, and he's acting like Bryony is his fiancée, and he's talking about all these times in the past when she like met his mother and how much his sister loves her and all this, even though obviously they're complete strangers. But the scene is so tender and so upsetting, and it's just beautifully done. But when I read that, I then started thinking, do you know what? Ian McEwan is such a talented writer, but this feels like a set of beautiful short stories loosely tied together by this one family. Like each of the sections and each of like different scenes have been really beautifully done. But I've never necessarily felt massively gripped by the story as a whole. I don't feel like I'm being carried through it. You know, like the reason I've been able to read it from September to December is because I haven't necessarily felt compelled to pick it up. Like it's been beautiful when I have picked it up, but I haven't felt that need to devour this book like I have with others. So that's how I felt there. We then move into the very final section when we've jumped forward to 1999. And I don't want to ruin the story if you haven't read it, but that final chapter changes everything that you've read before it. I didn't enjoy reading the chapter. I thought of all of this book, it was the least well written. I thought it was the most boring part. I didn't care for it at all. But the information that you get from that changes everything you've read beforehand. And having gone through this thinking, I'm not sure, you know, beautiful writing. I still love Ian McEwan as an author, but I don't think I like this book. I've now gotten to the end of it and I'm thinking I'm going to have to reread this book now that I know the information at the end, because I need to see how that's affected everything else that's happened in the book and how I would now reinterpret the book reading it a second time. So I really don't know. I wouldn't know how to rate this. I think I'd have to give it like a 4-star because of the fact that it's made me want to go back and reread it. And I will one day reread this. It's going to stay on my shelf because it was very cleverly done, that ending. Yeah. So a very confusing roller coaster of a ride, but has still cemented Ian McEwan as sort of one of my favourite authors in terms of writing. And I've got a couple more books of his on my shelf. I've got Machines Like Me on my Kindle and Enduring Love, which I think is another Booker-nominated book as well. I don't think Machines Like Me was, but anyway, yeah, it's been all over the place. I love sections of this. As I say, parts of this could make beautiful short stories. And I think as well, you could use this to study at school. I think this would make an excellent one to put onto like GCSE or A-level syllabuses, because you could literally take sections of it and deeply analyse those sections on their own, which not many books I don't think do. Obviously classics do, but like I don't think I've read many books where it does it quite the way this does. But yeah, so okay. Those are my thoughts.